friends of Amplify. Welcome to another horse racing hangout. My name is Anise Montpleasure. We're inviting you guys to join us live for our latest episode. For those of you who are regular followers of our horse racing hangouts, you might have seen that I took a break last month. We did not have an episode, so we are back again with a consistent schedule. I was traveling throughout June extensively for various Amplify related things, presenting at a conference in Texas, and then was at the Belmont Stakes doing some coverage there. And then from there, it was on to England and Ireland on sort of a fact-finding mission to work on further developing our programming and getting some ideas. Back to Lexington for Briarfest, and now I'm in Saratoga, which leads me to my next announcement. Our registration is open for our 2023 Amplify Saratoga student tours. So these are really geared towards high school and college students who are interested in learning about the variety of careers in the thoroughbred industry. You can go behind the scenes on the backstretch in the morning. We'll be at the races. You'll meet a variety of racing industry professionals. So check that out on Eventbrite. We'll be sharing that link consistently leading up to those tours in the coming weeks. And so with that, that brings me to our episode for today. And I always want to remind you guys as we go along, ask questions, leave comments wherever you are watching live from. You can submit a question or a comment, and we can actually bring that on screen live and answer that. So the theme for this season of Horse Racing Hangouts is virtual workshops to kickstart your career. And so that is really tangible takeaways that you can have in your pocket, information that you really need to know in order to pursue a career in the thoroughbred industry. And one of those pieces of information or a skill that you really need to have is being able to read and digest past performances. So in basic terms, past performances, when you go to a racetrack and you get a program and you open it up, you're going to see all of this data and information pertaining to every single horse in every race. And from a beginner's perspective, that might look like a whole bunch of jumbled up numbers and letters and words, and it probably doesn't make a lot of sense. But the more you learn about it and you come to understand it and digest that information, the easier it is to pick apart each race and better understand how a horse has the potential to perform in a race based on those conditions and what their running style is likely to be based on their previous races. So today we're going to really get into how to learn to read past performances, starting at a really basic level. And I do want to make a note, this episode might not be appropriate for all audiences. I do know that we have some youngsters out there that follow Amplify because we're going to be discussing some subject matter relating to betting. So I wanted to throw that out there right away. Getting back to the past performances, this is something, I have to read past performances in various aspects or capacities in my job. Aside from Amplify, I also work in Spanish horse racing media. But that being said, I am not an expert in teaching this. So earlier this year at Keeneland, I met professional horse player Tommy Massis and was really impressed with his philosophy about how to teach past performances to newcomers and why it's important. So I am really excited to welcome him to the show today to walk us through how he teaches people to learn to read past performances. So welcome, Tommy. Thank you so much for joining today.
Thanks, Anise. Thanks for having me.
No, we're excited to have you. Again, I welcome people to ask questions throughout this episode. We'll have kind of a flow as we go, and we'll have more time for questions at the end. But before we really dive into your segment, the presentation you're going to give us, why would you say that it's important for a newcomer to learn to read past performances, or PPs, as those of us who work in the industry frequently call them as an abbreviation?
Yeah, so the past performances are kind of daunting when you look at them, and it might take a lifetime to read them perfectly. Probably you'll never read them perfectly, or to try to figure out all the information in them. But I've been doing this for a long time, and the more I've done it, the more I figured out I really only need the basics. And a lot of people use a lot more info, and that's fine. But I learned for myself that just the basics are enough, and especially for teaching. And a lot of people will say, well, I want to get into the industry, but I'm not a gambler. Good. That's not a bad thing. And gambling is gambling. It's not a good, it's not really in general, the greatest thing. You got to have control. But right through the industry, I found so many people in this industry can't read them at all, or never attempted to read them.
Mm-hmm.
Never mind not reading them real good. They just, they're not going to bet on horses, and they're in other parts of the industry, and they don't want to bother. And it's silly, because it's, if you have a toolbox, it's just another tool in your skill set.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important at every level. Like, I'll give you the obvious ones, like a jockey should learn how to read a form. Some of them don't, but they have an agent who most likely does know how to read a form. You'd be surprised. Trainers, I know a few trainers, they can't read the form. Now, I don't know if it's because they can't read, period, because a lot of them come from other countries, and all they know is horses, and they're second generation, third generation trainers, and their family will read it for them. Owners, if you want to buy a horse, and you're not buying $1 million horse where you have a bloodstock agent who should know how to read the form. And some bloodstock agents might not, because they're, it's a different skill set. But it's insanity not to read this for many reasons. And if you're looking as an owner, you definitely should be taking care of your own business. If you're a trainer or a bloodstock agent, you imagine you being at the track with clients, and who do you like? You don't even have a form, and you're not going to look competent. And it's not a prerequisite to have one, but it is an asset, and you will be looking a lot more competent. But
I like what you said about it's another tool to have in your toolbox. Depending on your career, it's something that you might be able to get by not knowing, but it's not something that will ever hurt you. It's only something that can benefit you because you have that much more insight and knowledge into the industry, right?
Yeah, exactly. And me, as being a professional gambler, it's really a small part of my toolbox, really.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a necessity, and it's an asset for sure. But I'll even break it down to like blacksmiths and veterinarians. The PPs will show you the tendencies of the horse, or show the decline in the form of a horse, and there's something to be learned from them. And if they, like I've been saying, they don't have to have it, but it is a huge advantage, and
Right.
it is sometimes can spot something right away. Now, I'll even go further now to grooms and hot walkers. And grooms and hot walkers, for the same reason I just said about vets, these horses become their pets, their cats and dogs. They're, besides their vocation of taking care of them, I haven't seen a vet that, a groom or a hot walker that doesn't get attached to their babies that they see every day. And a trainer can have 60, 80 horses. Some trainers have more. And if a groom or hot walker can read the PPs, he can pick up things of why his baby is not performing. It's just another asset. And we can get away now from the back side of the racetrack and come over to the front side of the racetrack. You'd be surprised how many people in management in the race office can't read a form. And in this day and age, I'll be honest, getting into the industry and management and that, being a gambler or reading the form, even though it's an asset, you're going to scare a lot of people. You're going to make a lot of people insecure that don't have that skill set. And even like in marketing, the worst one for me, I found out dealing with Woodbine and having a 2-year contract to go on the radio for them, that the marketing department, almost all of them couldn't read the racing form. A majority of them can't read the racing form. And in that aspect of the game, what you're marketing is the racing form. the racing form, once the customer learns how to read the racing form, that's like the drug. That's the catch, the hook. And if you're marketing a product and you can't understand how to sell the hook, you know, I don't want to say the word drug, but the hook, you know.
I was going to say no drugs, but we're like really marketing the racing product itself. Like people want to come to the track to watch racing, you know, understand what's going on,
I'll put it even better. If you want to market to your potential everyday customer, right? The everyday customer gets into the game because they love reading the form. It's a puzzle. It's a challenge. It's really mentally stimulating. I used to read the form as a young kid. You know, I got hooked on racing early, and I used to read it without gambling. I used to listen to the results on the radio every half an hour, and I read the form for months. You know, my only output was to go pay the $2 back then for the racing form, which is not $2 anymore. But it's that puzzle that got me into the game.
Yeah.
That challenge.
Let's get into that puzzle. I want to hear your tutorial on how somebody can get started. And I do want to remind everybody, if you're watching this show, we shared a link ahead of time, and I also shared it in the comments just a couple moments ago. We do have some resources for you to be able to follow along. You can download these from a Google Drive link that we shared. This is a simplified version of past performances that Tommy is going to be going through. So I'm going to share those on screen, but if you want to download them to better be able to follow along, maybe on an iPad or something, go ahead and do that. So Tommy, should we get started with race one? Is that what you'd like me to share first?
Yeah. And I'll talk first as a precursor, how I read the racing form, or what the racing form does for me. Now, there is you can back up the racing form with video of previous races, and that's a lot of work. But just I look at the racing form and I try to paint a picture in my head on how that race is going to be run on the track. And what I mean by that is, nothing is really a science, but you know, really close to being a science. Well thought out theories, so nothing always works out the way you're supposed to. But a horse that goes to the we'll talk about fractions, quarter of a mile. So if a horse goes a quarter of a mile in 22 seconds and a half a mile in 44 seconds alone by himself with no other horses next to him, that horse has a better chance of winning than a horse that goes 23 seconds for the quarter and 45 seconds, which is much slower, with a horse beside him. So when horses get to run alone, they really run a lot better than having horses beside them. And sometimes in a race, a horse will be all by himself out there. Sometimes there'll be two of them challenging for the lead, three. So having that in mind, the basic way I handicap, I'll go through a racing form, 10 races. Some people spend hours. It'll take me 10 minutes to figure out what races have a horse that's the only one that goes to the front, or which races, which I prefer, is have 5 or 6 of them go to the front. And when 5 or 6 horses are going to the front and battling, that horse sitting way behind them doesn't have to be near as talented to beat those horses. So it's called pace scenario. And I basically, in handicapping, that's about my only trick. You know, gambling is another part. We'll leave that alone. But for reading the PPs, I just want to paint a picture of how that race is going to set up. Does you know, and sometimes it'll look like 5 horses are going to the front and only one will go, or vice versa, but there's nothing you can do about that. But I paint that picture, and we'll go into race one. And just to explain where you see race one, 5.5 furlongs, 8 furlongs is in a mile. So just to do that math, this race is 5.5 furlongs. And we'll go to horse one.
You guys can see that we've
Go ahead, Anise.
Got it up on screen. I was just going to say, we've got it up on screen here. So our first race, we're going to have a look at horse one here, guys. So you can follow along on screen as Tommy talks you through it.
Okay, and you'll see horse one, and I basically blacked out most of the racing form, and I'm just going to go to what you really have to. I should have blacked out more in here, but it doesn't matter. So we'll just start underneath race one, where it says January 27th, 22. So that's obviously the date of this race. The GP, that stands for Gulfstream Park. That's the racetrack that they raced on that day. And these are the previous races, not today. This is an upcoming race. So that was the previous race. So this horse last raced January 27th of 2022 in race 8 at Gulfstream Park. The next thing you see that's not really important for today, the FST shows the track condition was fast. We're underneath it. You can see SLY. That means it was sloppy because it was a lot of rain. So January 27th, race 8, Gulfstream Park. The track was fast. The one horse raced at this distance at 5.5 furlongs. The next number you see, 22 and 1, that's how long it took the horse to run the first quarter of a mile. So 2 furlongs. 45 and 2 is the cumulative time of the first 4 furlongs, half a mile. The 58 and 1 was the time after the first 5 furlongs, and the final time of 104 and 3 was the final race time that day. And that's of the winning horse. And this horse, if we look over now, at the first quarter where they went 22 and 1, this horse was second, ahead behind the leader. At the half, which was 45 and 2, was a length behind the leader. At the 5 furlongs was 3 lengths behind the leader. And at the end, finished fourth, 7 1/4 lengths behind the leader. So you can see that the horse early went out to challenge for the lead, fell a bit further back from the lead, fell even more further, and faded during the race. If you look at his lines before, similar kind of running style. He was challenging for the lead. And, as the race got longer, he faded away. Before that, you see 2 races where the horse got the front by himself, like I spoke about earlier, getting it by himself, and he got to win both times because the first part of the quarter of the race, he had no challenge. And then the second, he still had the lead. So you can see where it's not a science, but it's always easier when you're running on the lead by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you go down to the next horse, so you try to figure out now how this race is going to shape up. And you see a horse number 2 has only had 1 start. And he kind of did the same thing that if you look at horse 1 did in his first lifetime start. Went to the front, nobody challenged him, and he kept on going, and he won easy. We'll go now to horse 3. Horse 3 last time kind of sat 2 lengths off the whole race and made up a length. Kind of a horse that he's not that quick at the start, but he tries to engage in the middle. It shows his only window at the bottom was when he got to the front all by himself. And so even though most of the time he didn't get near the lead, he's kind of showing you his tendency to win is to be by himself on the front, just like the other 2. Now we'll go down to horse number 4. So horse number 4 in his last, we'll start horse number 4 from his first lifetime race. Went to the back. He was sitting 6th, sat 6th, around the turn, around the 5 furlong mark. He's almost on the lead, come to second, and then he passed everybody at the end. So he won a race coming from behind. His next start, he went to the front, and he was at the front early, stayed challenging halfway through, and then faded 6 lengths behind and then 16 lengths behind. Coming to his most recent start, I think they kind of figured out we're better off coming off the pace with this horse. That's the way he wants to run. So he sat fifth, third, and almost won the race, finishing second, a half a length behind. So far we've seen 3 horses that want to be on the front, and that's their best chance of winning. And the 4th horse is one that definitely wants to come from behind. Now we'll go to race horse number 5. And if you look at horse number 5, he's got 2 wins on the page. And his only 2 wins are where he got to be all alone on the lead. On January 12th, he tried to come off the pace. He kind of got near to the lead and kind of fell behind. But it's pretty obvious in looking that if I want to bet on horse 5, he's got to be in a race where I think he can get the lead. We'll go to horse 6. Horse 6 has only run 1 race in his life. And like most of them in here, he was on the front most of the time. And he was battling with another horse. He was ahead behind. At the end, he won by a neck, which isn't much. So there's one left. The 7 horse, I'll give the trainer credit. He's another horse that wants to be on the lead. And he probably saw there's 5 other horses in here that are going to the front. So he scratched. He didn't even bother to compete. He said, well, we'll lift the fight another day. No use going in here. And that's not always a bad move. I think that was a prudent move in a race like this. Mm-hmm. But having said that, he's also a horse that was racing at another track a few hours away. And they probably just decided no use shipping him in all that way where the other horses is already at Gulfstream and already been training. So when we look at this race, and for me, it takes me 5 seconds to look at this race and say, 5 of these horses want to be on the front. And most likely there's going to be more than 1 or 2 on the front. And there's only 1 horse that comes off the pace from the back of the bus, as the saying. So for me, it's pretty easy. It's like a 5-second decision. I can look at this in 5 seconds and know that the only horse I'm going to bet on is pretty obvious. And I don't know if you guys who looked earlier have come up with a horse they like and in here, but that's the way I look at it. Now, there's other factors that won't go into that'll make me determine if I want to bet the horse or not, whether the odds are right or that, but that's for another thing. So when you look at the form and it's basically chopped down the way I got it, that's all you should be looking at to begin with. Really, you can go to the track tomorrow and you might not pick a winner with what I just gave you, but you might look and find one of these scenarios. And I don't know if you want to go to the next race or do you want to show this race?
Let's go ahead and watch the replay of this race. Guys, I'm going to bring up the replay. If for whatever reason the connection is struggling, we are going to go ahead and share the links for these 2 races that we're discussing today after the show. So you will be able to watch them and assess the race as it took place. So
yeah, so I'm assuming number 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6 all want to go to the front, and number 4 is going to go to the back, and we'll see how it plays out.
I'm not going to have audio because, Tommy, I want you to be able to talk over the race. So I'm going to go ahead.
Okay, so number 1 there probably wants to go to the front, but he got a real bad start, so that probably didn't work out that good for him. So we'll see here the 2 and the 5 horse are going for the front. The 6 is trying to go to the front. The 3 is trying to keep up to them, and the 4 is just sitting there watching everybody. And so right now, you can see where from all the horses, the front runners, the 2 is the only one that's getting his race, and the 4 is definitely getting his race. So it worked out good for the 2, but those other horses got eliminated as soon as the 2 got the lead on them because they don't win unless they're on the front.
And I want to add from my perspective, a big thing with reading past performances is it makes it so much easier to watch a race because, as you've already mentioned, Tommy, you can kind of predict where the horses are going to be during the race. So when you have a field, when you start getting up to larger fields of, 10, 12 horses, it makes it a lot easier, to kind of predictively know where everyone is going to be positioned. I'm going to stop my screen there. And so I'm going to guess that your horse that you had selected was the 4. I know you didn't tell us ahead of time, but it was pretty
obvious, right? It's just pretty
paper.
obvious. And, if I was betting the 4 in that race and I saw the 2 was the only one on the front, I might say to myself, that's, I thought they would be battling. But even when they don't battle, you can just see these horses, they won't win. Most of them won't win unless they get their setup. Now, some horses are different. Some are multi-dimensional. They can go to the front, they can go to the back, they can stay in the middle, but not too many of them.
Should we move on to race 2?
Yes, we should.
On to the next one. Here we go. So we've got race 2 on screen, guys. And again, if you're watching and you have these resources downloaded from our Google Drive link that I shared, we're going on to race 2, the closer setup simplified. Go ahead and bring that up, and Tommy's going to talk us through it.
Okay, so that first race I showed is probably an anomaly, that it's so cut and dry that I can look at it in 10 seconds. The only thing I could have hoped more for, that the 4 was a real long shot, and sometimes those long shots, even though they're not as good, they might just get up and win by a nose and you get paid off. But race 2 is a different type of race, and race 2 is what you get more of. You get more horses, and it's a lot more complicated. So looking down, you can see it. The horses raced at a different racetrack. It was actually they came out of the same day, but the 2-horse race March 4th, 2022 at the fairgrounds, which is a different racetrack. And when you look at the 2-horse, you have to take it into a factor that if a horse can get the lead in a longer race, it's harder to get the lead in a shorter race because you get faster horses going in there.
That's actually good. I never really thought about that. Like, that's a good piece that I'm going to file away in my head as well.
It's more advanced, but people think if a horse is running 3/4 of a mile and he goes to the front and he stops, he doesn't finish too good, people will think that horse should run a shorter distance, but it's actually the opposite, because you run 6 furlongs and the fractions might be 22 and 45, but if you run a mile, they might be 24 and 48, and you get that lead so much easier with no one around you, like I alluded to in the race before. Horses, most of them want to be by themselves, and they got nothing to think about but running. They're not looking at the other horse. They're not getting stressed. Now, there is some horses that do want to engage. They want to fight. They want to battle. But not too many of them that wouldn't want to be all alone on the front. So this race is a lot trickier to figure out. So when I look at the 2-horse, I see last time that he came off the pace from sitting 4th and 5th, and he came on late and he won the race. So if you go down 3 and 4 races, he was closer to the lead and he won the race. And at the shorter distance, 5.5 furlongs, which is about exactly half a furlong shorter than he's been running. Now I got to make a decision. Is this horse going to go to the front, or is he going to go to the back? When I look at the times now, I look at the 2 races, the last 2 races where he wasn't on the front. That opening quarter was 21 and 3 and 21 and 4. So he probably wanted to be on the front, but he couldn't keep up. When you look at the races he won, they were 22 and 1 and 22 and 1. And it might not seem like a big difference, but 1/5 of a second is probably equal to a length usually. So 2/5 of a second is 2 lengths. It's, you know, it is doesn't seem like a lot, but it's a lot, especially when they're motoring out of the gate. Okay, I'll look at the same thing down at the 2 horse. The 3 horse. He came from the back last time at 5 furlongs. Before that, at 6 furlongs, he kind of wants to be on the lead. But when he gets the lead and wins, he got it once in 22-3 at 5.5 furlongs. He did go 21-4 once, so he's a possible horse that's going to go to the front.
Okay.
Go to horse number 4. Horse number 4, there's one anomaly on the page, but every race he's trying to go to the front. Every race. He might not get the front, but he's going to the front. And last time they went in 21-3, and he got a part of the lead, and he battled and got beat 1 length at the end. So, in my opinion, the 2 is going to come off the pace. The 3 probably wants to go to the front. I don't know if he'll get it. The 4 is definitely going to try to go to the front. Now we'll go to the next horse, who is horse 1. And when they're out of order like this, where the 1 is after the 4 or 5, it just means that the 1 was part of a 2-horse entry. So these horses are listed in post position order, the order they're going to start in the starting gate. So you'll see on the other page, he has an entry made. So number 1 definitely comes from way off the pace every time. So you know where he's going to be sitting near the back. Horse number 5 definitely is going to be at the back. He's been running mile races, which were a lot longer, and he comes off the pace. Horse number 6, he's kind of like the 3, tries to go to the front, isn't really that fast, doesn't always get the front. When they go real fast, he can't get the front, so he's a type of horse that is going to try to get to the front, but I don't think he'll be near the front. Horse number 7. Horse number 7, he's another, there's a few of them in this race. They want to be on the front, but they're really not fast enough to be on the front. And he's one of them. And sometimes if they just beat the gate, they can beat the other horses out. But I don't think he can get the lead in here. And then we'll go to the other part of the entry, 1A. So when you bet 1 and 1A, you get both of them. They'll both be the same price, but you get 2 for 1, basically. So here's a horse, his last 2 races, he's come off the pace. And where you see that trainer line there, it's showing you that there was a change in ownership and trainer from that day. And it kind of shows you, too, his best days were before him. He's another one. He tries to get the lead, but when they go 21, he really can't. Not lately, anyway. Go to horse number 8. He's a horse that definitely comes off the pace. He's going to be sitting right at the back. Horse 9 is similar, going to be sitting at the middle or the back. So looking at this race, I'm going to be looking for a horse that's going to be on the front. And no matter who you pick on the front, it is a type of race where that there won't be too many going, so it gives the front runners a chance for one of them to get free and on the front. And just because you get on the lead all by yourself doesn't mean you're going to win. You're going to have some semblance of talent to beat the other horses. But it is a big advantage, and it is basically, after all these years of learning all this other stuff about it, that's basically what I do, is analyze a race like this. And I guess at the gambler's level, I will use replays and other stuff. But when you're in this industry, in other aspects, that's all you really need to know. You really need to know how the race shapes up and the minimal running line, what that means. That's a quarter, that's a half, and it's a starting point. And when you black out the rest of the form, if you're looking at a racing form and just look at that, you won't get overwhelmed with all this info. All this info, we're going to leave you stuff that'll break it down, that'll show you a real racing form complete, and a real sharp guy from Kentucky that works for Churchill Downs, I think it is, or Fairgrounds. He'll break down the legend. He'll be your personal legend. He'll go step by step by step. But just for basic looking at the racing form, that's all you should focus at. And then you can determine, depending on where you go into the industry, what else do you need to know? Do you need to know pace figures, speed figures? Probably not. Should you, if you're going into veterinary or something with the wellness of the horse, should you be aware of their workouts, which I didn't put on here, which will be there? Yeah, that's important. You want to see patterns in their workout. A horse that's not working out probably has issues, unless he's racing too close together. You don't have to work out, but you'll see the info you need to add for your toolbox, for your skill set, for your vocation in horse racing.
And so for a starting point, everyone, that I like the way you put that, Tommy, is being able to pick apart how the race will shape up in general. You know, for a beginner, you don't have to really get into the nitty gritty of, you know, understanding all of these tiny nuances of the race. And unless you're really interested in getting into the gambling, the handicapping side, just being able to have that initial, I know which horses want to go to the lead or will be close to the lead. I know which ones are going to try to close from behind, is going to help to give you an overall picture of how the race could run, how it could set up, and it's going to make it a lot easier to watch it overall. And like Tommy is saying, the more you refine your skills and pick out what tools you need to have in your tool belt, the more you can start to pick apart the other aspects of past performances and what components you want to factor in to how you look at and read a race. Tommy, do you want me to bring up the replay for this one?
Yeah, I just want to add one thing, right? The whole thing of these shortened race forms right now, that's what, if you're new at this, that's all I want you to look at. Don't look at that form and say, wow, what's this? You know, it's just overwhelming. And when I started, it was overwhelming. I started playing harness racing, which was a more simpler form. So just look at this part. You know, just focus on that for now. And when you get the hang of that, and then you can step forward and look at the next, you know, things that you want to add.
We had a comment from Holly Brown. Hey, Holly, thank you so much for tuning in. Just commenting that, you know, she hadn't thought about the form like this before. So thank you so much. And I also want to throw it out there again before we continue moving forward. If anybody has questions at any point in time as we're going through this, if you need us to explain something in more detail, you know, it's great to be able to ask while we have Tommy on live. And even those of you who are watching the replay, we're going to go ahead and share his email at the end, so you'll be able to follow up and ask additional questions.
Yeah, you can give up my email. I'm also on Twitter at Tommy Hammer, or my name, Tommy Massis. You'll find me on there. Message me. I'm going to try to learn how to open my message boxes and that.
And we do have a quick question before I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. And Tommy, you can decide whether you want to share this or answer this at the end, or if you want to answer it now. But Holly asks, what does the fast or sloppy track condition tell you on how to factor that in when making observations or predictions?
So there is info in the racing form that'll show you the horse's previous record just on a wet track. So, but you have to be careful, because a wet track can mean a track that's listed good, that's a little wet, that's muddy, which is drying out, and sloppy, that's, you know, basically pea soup or whatever you want to call it, you know. And it's more how are the horses today running on that track? Is the sloppy track sometimes you see the inside part of the racetrack. It looks like you could see the body of water, and most likely horses don't want to race there. So it's more something I'll attribute to the actual races today than the horse, because there can be a lot of reasons why that horse didn't like a sloppy track last time. And I'll give you one good example. A horse that goes to the front, he's not going to get slop splashed all over his face, where he might like it today. Next time he's behind a horse, he might not like that at all. I know I wouldn't. Right? You're running, you got a guy on your back, and you're getting water in your eyes, your nose, your mouth, and mud. So some of them just don't like it. They're like humans. Some of them are tough, some of them are soft.
That's a good point. And again, that's something that, I find in my own, as I'm making selections on races, I'll go back and think, oh, well, this horse ran really well on a sloppy track, and attribute that as a pattern for that horse, when really I like the idea of looking at it as, how will this horse perform on this track on this particular day given these conditions, and thinking through how where they could be positioned in the race could affect it on this given day. It's kind of taking that element of looking at each horse as an individual on each particular day versus trying to set up patterns that you think are going to work every time.
Yeah, that pattern is going to be hard to distinguish, because did he run bad because he was on the inside, or did he run bad because it was just sloppy? And a lot of times when it's real sloppy on most tracks, the races come off the turf and there's short fields, and I usually skip those days anyway. So, but I'll put it in the clutter department. Don't worry about it, because it's going to just confuse you more than set you on a straight path, right? Yeah. And I do a lot of homework, and I don't do that much homework where I'm going to look back and see why exactly that horse didn't run good on a sloppy track or did run good. I basically handicap a race the way I showed you. I try to figure a race out with my specialty is having 10 horses go to the front and one that comes from behind, and hope that horse, and I like it when they're inferior horses where you get big odds, and hopefully just the dynamics of the race helps you overcome the talent.
Right. So do you want to share your pick for this fairgrounds race before the race or after? I haven't established a horse yet that I really liked in particular, so I would love it if you could talk us through this one as the race is running, just the same as you did for the Gulfstream race.
I picked these two races because I was actually in Florida betting horses, and a friend of mine who was trying to work on these, he goes, find me two races, right? And he said, find me two races, one where the horse comes from off the pace, like we saw, and one where the horse wins on the front. And I happened to bet on both these horses that day. So it's easy for me. I came to the conclusion that the 4 horse was the fastest and was probably going to get the lead. He's also racing, to get too technical, on the dirt at the fairgrounds, which really helps front runners, where that other horse was racing on the synthetic at Gulfstream Park, which can more help horses off the pace. So I know this 4 horse, if he doesn't get the lead all alone, I'm not going to watch the rest of the race. I'm going to lose. If he does get the lead, then I know I got a good chance.
Okay. Let's check it out. So 4 horse got the lead.
And then you can see how, the one guy's standing up on the 3 because he wants to be on the lead, but he's not fast enough. And now there's horses in front of him, and he caused horses to go wide and battle. And I'm sitting here right now going, uh-oh, that guy's too close to me. But you see where besides the 4 and the 1A, the rest of them are at a severe disadvantage back there because they're not really, it's not a long race, and these horses on the front haven't really exerted themselves.
one question I have, and again, not to overcomplicate things, but how much do you factor in post position when you're making your selections? That's
There is,
something that I end up having particular horses that I really like, and I throw out post position as a factor, but I know for some people that is a really strong factor that they consider.
well, my home track in Toronto, Woodbine, when they race 6 furlongs, the one position is horrible. And the inside position on shorter races at a lot of tracks, the very inside is horrible because if, and this has been for, I'm talking 40 years now, whether it was 6 furlongs at Woodbine or 4.5 furlongs of this old track called Greenwood. And you'd figure the inside is a better position, and it should be, but for some reason, the gate would open, and like the previous race at Gulfstream, where that one horse on the inside didn't start. So I don't know if that's what happens at 6 furlongs at Woodbine. And I couldn't figure out one day. It was a busy day, and we parked way down the end of the parking lot. When we got there, we were right where the gate was. The last race was 6 furlongs. And from the fence of the parking lot, if you look, you're looking at the gate, and the gate is pointed towards the racetrack where they're going to go out.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see, if you look through the hole where the one horse was, you actually see the turn. So the horse standing there actually sees the turn. It looks like it's in his path. And so when the gate opens, they just freeze and balk because they think they're going to run into the turn. It's more of an optical illusion. They're not going to run, but it actually looks like that. And then someone told me the same thing at Greenwood at 4.5. The horses always, most of them balk because they see the turn. So other than that, one little thing, to me, a lot of people don't like real wide positions, but it's on a wide position. If you keep going, you'll end up real wide on the turns, but you got time to get in position. So I don't factor. I learned that, try to learning everything in horse racing over the years. I've filed 98% of it as clutter, and it's just don't even think about it. That one position, at Woodbine at 6 furlongs, if the horse is a real favorite horse, then I avoid him. If he's a long shot, I'll take my chances. But I don't let things like that, that they're not here or there. It's no use. It's no use. It's just gonna get you. Get your head spinning and thinking for no reason.
And again, as you said, the more you get involved in racing, the more you decide what information you need from a race, how much studying you personally need to put into the form, aside from just understanding the basics, the more you can pick the elements that you want to hone in on. So I think that's a really good overall takeaway for today. And before we let you go, Tommy, I have questions for you, because usually we start with this, but I want to know how you got started in racing, because I know you mentioned buying the form when you were 12 or something. So how did you get introduced to the thoroughbred industry?
So it was actually first it was harness racing, and I came home one day, and we basically, my parents and grandparents were immigrants, and we all lived in the same street or two streets. And I saw my uncle and my cousin sitting on the sofa, and they looked like they were going to be executed.
Oh gosh!
And they were they were petrified, shaking. And so I enjoyed it because they were older than me. They picked on me. So I went to my grandma. I go, "What did they do wrong?" "Your grandfather is going to kill them when he gets home from work." I go, "Grandpa?" Like, my grandpa was the sweetest man. Never saw him get mad, right? And I started laughing. And my grandmother goes, "You better leave." I said, No, please let me watch. So my grandfather comes home, and he goes, "Everyone's telling me you two idiots are going to the racetrack. You work hard and blow all your money, this and that." And my grandfather goes, and they both lived in that house with my grandfather. My uncle was single. His older brother was the father of my cousin. And my grandfather, "You guys go to the track again, you're out of my house, and that's it. You're gone." And they said, He points at me. He goes, look, he's left at home to play with the girls. He goes, take the kid to a movie, take him somewhere. So they said, okay. So they said, come on, we're going to go to a movie. So we're going on the highway. When we're coming down, I see these big, bright lights. And I said, whoa, driving. And they're laughing. They go, yeah, driving. And we pull in. I go, where are we? They go, don't tell Grandpa. We're at the racetrack.
Racetrack.
We went to Greenwood Racetrack. And I'm going, no. Take me home. I don't want to.
Yeah, I don't want to get kicked out. You guys
no, I'm not going to get kicked out. I didn't even live in there. I lived across, but Grandpa took care of me. Grandpa and Grandma, no. I'm telling, no, you're not. Come on. I go in and I was, and then I saw the cool guys in the neighborhood were all there. Hey, Nick, hey, Tony, hey. And I'm sitting there and I'm kind of bored, right? And one guy hit a race. He goes, kid, go get some coffees. Go get 4 coffees, get yourself a Coke. And you give me like $10. I bring him $7 and change back. He goes, nah, keep it. I go, okay. I like this place. Next day, I go to my cousin and my uncle. I'm coming to the track with you. We're not going to the track. We're going to the bar. We're going to a bar, right? And I said, listen, I'm coming, right? I'm getting in the car. If you don't let me in, I'm telling Grandpa you're going to the track. And if you are going to the bar, I'll sit in the car all night and go to sleep. Don't worry about me. And they argued. I go, okay, I'm telling Grandpa. And that was it. They took me to the racetrack. I extorted them and they took me to the racetrack. And I never bet for the longest of times. Took me a long time before I even made a $2 bet. But I fell in love. And it was more like the cool older guys in the neighborhood that wouldn't talk to me. They're putting money in my pocket. They cash a ticket, give me a few bucks. No, I loved it. And then when I started to, the first horse I bet was a horse called Ray Baldan. And it was, I know a lot of you are younger, but it's, you just have to Google Trigger, Roy Rogers' horse. Beautiful color. And I just said, yeah, I'm going to put $2 on that horse every time it runs. So once a week, I bet $2 on Ray. And then I would follow these trainers that race maybe 2 horses a week. So I wouldn't have to bet. I put $2 on them, and then I got into it, and then it just, it actually, for the beginning of my life, it wasn't good. Every penny I had, I blew, but I'm pretty stubborn, and it took me a while, but I got to the point where I stuck with it and really made it a job and went to work at it. And once I started going to work at it with a clear mind and a focus, I don't know how, but I did it.
And that actually kind of leads me to another question where, somebody might hear, that you're a professional horse player and wonder, well, what exactly does that mean? Define that for us. What is a professional horse player?
You'll hear a winning horse player. And so winning horse player at the end of the year will show a profit, a small profit. A professional horse player has pays all his bills with it. He has no other source of income. So you'll see people on TV giving out picks and that. Well, they're professional analysts in a way, but to actually have no other income and to bet horses as your job and to live a life, that's a professional horse player in my eyes.
It's a great definition. I'm glad you mentioned that because there are so many, on these videos, we frequently talk about, defining some of the racing jargon that we use frequently. So somebody might hear that someone is a handicapper versus a professional horse player versus, like you said, winning horse player. And there are differences between all of those. I would call myself a casual handicapper / I analyze races for some of the TV stuff that I do. But it's not something that I do in a professional capacity. It's for fun, for enjoyment, for sharing that with, the general public, versus a professional horse player doing that entirely for a living.
To be honest with you, like I winter down in Florida, and I could mention 3 or 4 girls who were on-air handicappers who were probably just as good as me, and maybe 1 or 2 of them better than me in hand picking races. But when you get into professional horse player, maybe the right word should be professional gambler, because that's the whole skill set to win at this game is the gambling part. That's my strength. Picking horses, like I said, some of these girls I've seen down there, they're real good. And
Mm-hmm.
like I said, one of them for sure is a better handicapper than me, but it's the gambling part. That's
And
where
that
I
and that you
separate.
define as determining how much money you're going to place in different capacities, so different types of bets on different horses,
Yeah,
correct?
it's not, instead of the what, it's the how
Yes.
and the when.
And so I think, another thing I really want to cover before we wrap up is we've talked a lot about, you've mentioned racing form. When somebody comes to the races, they can buy a program, or there's the daily racing form, or there are Brisnet sheets. There are all these different types of past performances that people can get. What would be, without picking one in particular, I would like you to explain overall what is the difference between one to the other? Because a general racing fan would think, well, the DRF is the exact same as this regular racing program that I'm purchasing. What would be the difference and the advantage to somebody who's going to be, handicapping the races for the day?
Okay, so the way I've edited we call them Cole's notes here. What do you call them? The Cliff Notes version,
Cliff
right?
Notes version,
Yeah.
yes.
So if you look at the daily racing form or the Brisnet, if you just look at this part, it's basically the same. It's all the proprietary info around it. Their rating numbers and their professionals adding all that stuff is down the road if it fits into what you're doing. All I need is what I have here.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll have different what are not on here is a rating number called the buyers. So a higher buyer means that race was higher, and Brisnet has power numbers or something. But
yeah, it's like different rating
honestly,
systems for an individual horse and how they performed in that race on that day. That's how I would define it for those, for the newbies out there who are wondering what we're talking about.
honestly, I would use whatever one I could get for free. A lot of people, if you know someone
Yeah.
who'll share them with you. No, really, because the ones that I showed you today, the daily racing form past performances are the old school traditional ones that everybody learned, and then Brisnet came later. So what kind of Brisnet did took a page from Tommy Hilfiger. I don't know if you know Tommy Hilfiger used to open up stores in sketchy neighborhood and leave all the pants and clothes outside so they were easy to steal.
I did not. I've never heard that before.
Yeah. So everybody would be wearing Tommy. You'd see Tommy, everyone wearing Tommy, and then he battened down the hatches, kept the clothes inside, raised the price. Everybody wanted Tommy. So what Brisnet did when I first heard of them, there was a cheat code. So you could punch in the URL or whatever you call it. If you punched in this, and when W01 and the date, that would give you the past performances for Woodbine Race 1. And I'm pretty sure it was Brisnet that spread this out. So now everyone who couldn't afford the PPs were using this to get the free ones. Yeah. And sure enough, a lot of people learned how to read the Brisnet PPs, which were different that way. So that's the only, if you haven't started on anyone, I just see wherever you can get, I know they're not fond of sharing, but people share all the time.
Mm-hmm.
People are paying $2,000 a year for a subscription. I'm sure they're sharing or splitting it. If you know somebody that'll give you PPs for free, that's where I would go.
And, guys, everyone watching, whether you're watching live or the recording afterwards, we are going to share some follow-up resources that will be in the show notes on YouTube, and we'll share them on our other social media channels, where we'll have some links to a couple other videos and websites that will have more in-depth resources about reading past performances. And on the note of free past performances, there is a website. It's like the free PPs. Again, I will share this, and you can actually look up free past performances by trainer and by a couple different racing stables on that website, and download them. And they have a lot of information on them. So, whether you're buying a racing program and you get to the track, or you buy a daily racing form, or you look up Brisnet or any other number of different sheets with past performances, as long as you have this overall thought in your mind that Tommy has shared with us today, which is essentially, pace makes the race and helps you determine the overall setup, that's going to be a great starting point for you. Tommy, do you have any last words of wisdom to leave us with before we close out the show?
Yeah, I would. There's a book, and don't want to be offensive. It's called Horse Racing for Dummies, and it's on Amazon. And it's I would get the new edition because I'm actually contributed to it. It's Horse Racing for Dummies on Amazon, and the author is Richard Ang, and he just lowered it. I talked to him the other day, so he discounted it on Amazon. You'll see it's already been discounted, so that won't be there for a while. That's a real good book that really can go right through the industry, the horse racing from, he explains it slow and perfect. And he's a lifelong professional handicapper, analyst, whatever you want to call it. So Horse Racing for Dummies on Amazon, and the newer edition, like I said, it's discounted. So I would take advantage of that. That's one resource. Anise will put up a bunch of them, and you guys can contact me. I'll try to get back to you as quick as I can. And,
Sarah, I've got your if anybody wants to get a hold of Tommy with additional follow-up questions, he was kind enough to share his email. Like he said before, he also had his Twitter on here. It looks like we had, thank you so much. Holly says, thanks for all the intriguing information to help me add to my tool belt. That is awesome. Thank you, Holly, for tuning in. And again, here's Tommy's email if anybody wants to follow up. And I can also say Horse Racing for Dummies, I read that when I was probably like 13, just getting involved in the industry, and it is definitely a good resource. So
yeah, I can't remember if I read it, but I read everything I could get my hands on. Most of it was really nah. But you're not getting, with Horse Racing for Dummies, you're not getting somebody's thoughts. You're getting somebody's info laid out to you the right way.
Tommy, thank you so much for joining today. This has been great. I think it was an awesome overview for a newcomer to start to understand, wrap their mind around past performances. We know where to get a hold of you if anyone has follow-up questions.
One more thing on Facebook. On Facebook, there's a lot of groups. I think one is called Homeless, but you just search for horse racing groups. And I'm not on Facebook much, but when I first got on Facebook, a lot of people asked me to join these groups, and there's a lot of people on there that have different skill sets that can help you learn. Just don't send them any money for bets or anything, because you can kiss them goodbye. I don't trust nobody.
Don't get sucked into anything.
Yeah, but there are a lot of groups on there, and they really are good people that will try to help you and answer your questions, and it can be real fun.
It's a welcoming, horse racing in general is a welcoming community. It's, we really embrace new people, and we're all happy to answer questions about a variety of different topics. And, the overall goal is to get new people involved, make it less confusing, help people get into the sport. And thank you so much, Tommy, for your time today. And we'll hopefully catch up with you again soon.
My pleasure, Anise. Thank you.
Bye. Awesome episode today, guys. I hope you enjoyed getting back into, the season of the Amplify Horse Racing Hangouts. I don't have next month's episode set up yet. We're hoping that it's going to be something regarding becoming a groom, some of the necessary hands-on information that you would need for that. But if you have recommendations, again, drop them in the comments. What episode do you guys want to see? What information do you feel like you really want to know and consume in your pursuit of the industry? And so again, pitch for our Amplify Horse Racing Saratoga tours that are coming up throughout the month of August. We'll be sharing the links for those to be able to register. If you guys ever have questions, reach out to info@amplifyhorseracing.org. Follow us on social media, and we will see you on the next episode.